In Chile, social and political movements have mobilized to condemn the intention of Sebastián Piñera's government to block the second 10% withdrawal from private pension funds. The head of the U.S. General Services Administration has informed President-elect Joe Biden that the official government transition process has been approved. In the DRC, former militia leader Ntabo Ntaberi, alias Chika, is sentenced to life in prison for war crimes and mass rape. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. In Chile, social and political movements have mobilized to condemn the intention of the Sebastián Piñera's government to block the second 10% withdrawal from private pension funds. President Piñera filed an appeal with the Constitutional Court to stop the bill from being considered in the Senate. In response, citizens announced a march to the presidential palace to demand the resignation of the head of state. Protests are being held in the streets of several cities in the country and are accompanied by the banging of pots and pans from people's homes. The bill to approve a second withdrawal from pension funds comes as Chileans continue to face an economic crisis that has intensified in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic.
What is that the government is looking for? They aim to buy time to negotiate behind the scenes with a section of the opposition the pension reform in order to comply with the strategy agreed with SOFOFA a few days ago to safeguard the failed system of individual capitalization to keep at their disposal the provisional savings. So let's stay on our toes, because this government is an indolent and insensible government which seeks to protect big capital to the detriment of the vast majority of our people.
A government that is on the ground, a government that has lost each and every one of the votes turns through this mechanism to try to save a project that clearly does not have a majority.
The government intends to impose a tax burden and also demand that it be returned later, that is, for the workers' own money they will have to pay.
In Chile, health sector workers announced they will continue to conduct indefinite national strike action due to the lack of response to their demands by the government. Health professionals are striking to demand the fulfillment of the commitments made by the government to the sector, among them the payment of bonuses and the adequate salaries in the face of the ongoing economic crisis. Demonstrators have also denounced the lack of resources in healthcare centers, as well as the precarious working conditions of personnel on the front line of the COVID-19 pandemic.
We have decided to call an indefinite national strike starting at 8 o'clock in the morning on November 23, which will continue until we get a proper response from the government to stop the lies and mockery of health workers, as has been the case up to now.
The government of Honduras reported that at least 4 million people were affected by the impact of tropical depression Ira, followed by Hurricane Iota. In its latest report, the Secretariat of National Risk and Contingency Management detailed that nearly 740,000 people were affected by the devastation sparked by Ira, while more than 3 million suffered the impacts of Iota. Authorities explained that the heavy rains and strong winds damaged more than 25,000 houses, and also warned that they do not rule out that the numbers of people affected by the natural disaster will increase as the day goes by. Venezuela's electoral authorities announced Monday that the training of regional electoral boards will be carried out from November 23rd until November 27, as set out in the electoral calendar ahead of the December 6 parliamentary elections. The training will be conducted by the National Electoral Council and the National Office of Electoral Organizations. Meanwhile, nearly 294,000 identity cards have been processed by the Administrative Service of Identification, Migration and Immigration in the lead-up to the parliamentary elections in order to ensure all voters have the necessary ID to cast their ballots. The president of the service, Gustavo Vizcaíno, noted that the institution is working to approve electronic ID cards with QR codes to be used in the long term. 14,400 candidates from 107 political and indigenous organizations have registered to stand in the parliamentary elections that will determine the 277 members of the National Assembly. The electric power crisis continues in the Brazilian state of Amapá, which has seen blackouts for the past 21 days, with a visit by President Jair Bolsonaro, who failed to provide any solutions, sparking further outrage. Authorities from the Ministry of Mines and Energy acknowledged that the electrical load capacity needed to reactivate the service has not been met, and reported that the supply and rationing problems could be extended until Thursday. The electric company of Amapá, responsible for the service, reported that the distribution of power will take longer than expected after registering strong explosions at facilities over the weekend. Meanwhile, the local population continues to protest, demanding immediate solutions from the government of Jair Bolsonaro. In the Dominican Republic, employees and owners of bars, nightclubs, and other nightlife establishments have demanded economic support from the government in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Sector workers rallied in the central flag square of the capital, Santo Domingo, stressing that lockdown measures have seen them out of work for more than 8 months. They call on the authorities to include them in economic plans that will allow them to cover their expenses. They also call for the reopening of establishments and committed to comply with all the prevention measures to avoid the spread of the novel coronavirus.
We are an association that was already organized. We are more than 300 businesses that pay rent. We pay electricity. We have a staff that is not working since we cannot support them. We are asset stripping.
We want the curfew to be relaxed so that we can open new businesses, since we have been closed for 9 months and we are extremely affected, as are other businesses. But we are more affected because we have not been taken into account. The government must show that we are also taken into account, that is to say, all businesses, stores, supermarkets, all of this, which is usually full of people all the time. So a nightclub cannot be opened because people get infected. People are infected wherever. If you follow me, people put on masks. It is not to take care of themselves. They put on masks, but it is so that a policeman, a patrol car, doesn't take them away.
And we'll go now to a short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The head of the U.S. General Services Administration has informed President-elect Joe Biden that the official governmental transition process has been approved. After weeks of delays, GSA Administrator Emily Murphy wrote in a letter to Biden that he is now able to access millions of dollars in federal funds and other resources to begin his transition to power. The Biden campaign celebrated the news in a statement, saying the decision was a needed step to begin tackling the challenges facing the country. In a pair of tweets, President Donald Trump vowed to continue his legal fight, but also said he was recommending that Emily and her team do what needs to be done with regard to initial protocols and had told his team to do the same. Trump also thanked Murphy, who he appointed to the GSA, claiming she had been harassed, threatened, and abused. On Tuesday, Trump also tweeted that the GSA statements will not stop his legal inquiries regarding what he called the most corruption election in American political history, and also said that he will never concede to fake ballots. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden has begun announcing the nominees for his cabinet, including the first woman to lead intelligence and the first Latino to head Homeland Security. On Monday, Biden unveiled a slate of top foreign policy and national security experts to keep post, seeking to see a clear difference between his administration and that of President Donald Trump, who he had criticized for sidelining experienced figures. Veteran diplomat Antony Blinken was announced as his pick for Secretary of State, and Linda Thomas Greenfield as ambassador to the United Nations, both of whom boast extensive foreign policy experience. Cuban-born Alejandro Mayorkas, a former Deputy Secretary of the Department of Home Security, was chosen to lead the department with the task of reforming Trump's hardline immigration policy. Biden's pick for Director of the National Intelligence, Avril Haines, a former top CIA official and Deputy National Security Advisor, will also make history if confirmed by the Senate. Also among the nominees is former Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen to serve as Treasury Secretary, who will be the first woman to lead the Treasury Department. And the Michigan State Board of Canvassers voted Monday to certify the state's election results, formally granting President-elect Joe Biden the state's 16 electoral votes, as President Donald Trump's challenges the other key states fall flat. The question of certifying Michigan's election results moved center stage amid the Trump campaign's dubious claims of voter fraud and efforts in court to delay certification and overturn the election results in several key states that voted for Biden. The state's highly anticipated certification was the latest in a series of events over the past week that have reinforced Biden's victory, while Trump has continued to refuse to concede. In Pennsylvania, the state Supreme Court on Monday rejected the Trump campaign's effort to block the counting of certain absentee ballots, clearing the way for votes to be certified in multiple counties, including Philadelphia. The news came after the Trump campaign's lawsuit on Saturday seeking to invalidate millions of Pennsylvania votes was dismissed by the federal judge. The Trump campaign has distanced itself from a lawyer who made dramatic claims of voter fraud at several media events. Sidney Powell claimed without evidence last week that electronic voting system had switched millions of votes to President-elect Joe Biden because he was sponsored by communist money coming from Venezuela and Cuba. On Sunday, the Trump campaign issued a statement saying Powell was practicing law on her own and was not a member of the Trump legal team, while also stressing she is not a lawyer for the president in his personal capacity, despite her appearance alongside Trump campaign lawyers Rudy Giuliani and Gina Ellis. A tweet from President Donald Trump earlier this month explicitly named her as part of her team, referring to her as one of his wonderful lawyers and representatives. This Monday, Mexico's Roman Catholic Church announced the cancellation of what is considered the world's largest Catholic pilgrimage for the Virgin of Guadalupe due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In a statement, the church noted that the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe will be closed for December the 10th to 13th. The Virgin is celebrated on December the 12th, and for weeks in advance, pilgrims travel from across Mexico to gather by the millions in Mexico City. Bishop Salvador Martinez, the rector of the Basilica, said recently that as many as 15 million pilgrims visit during the first 2 weeks of December. This year, the Catholic authorities have recommended that the Guadalupe celebrations be held in churches or at home, avoiding gatherings and with the appropriate health measures. In France, hundreds installed on a Monday evening at Place de la République, demanding accommodation for migrants after a refugee camp in Saint-Denis was evacuated by the police. The dismantling of a camp of 500 tents deployed by associations on the place. Barely an hour after the installation, the police began to remove part of the tents, sometimes with exiles still inside, under the cries on hoods of activists and migrants. According to aid associations for migrants, nearly 1,000 people have since been wandering the streets of the outskirts of Paris. They alert hundreds of people were left without solution after the evacuation. The police in the Polish capital clashed with demonstrators on Monday, who chained themselves to the gates of the Ministry of National Education and staged a roadblock on a bridge in protest over Poland's further restriction of abortion rights. Huge protests have erupted in recent weeks following the ruling by Poland's Constitutional Tribunal in October that the abortion of fetuses with serious congenital defects was unconstitutional. Abortion is only allowed in Poland if the pregnancy is the result of rape or incest, if the woman's life is in danger, or until now, if the fetus is affected by severe congenital defects. Given the widespread protests, the government has since delayed implementing the tribunal's decision. On Monday, police drafted in a town truck to remove cars from the capital's Lasinrowski Bridge after they had been left there as part of the blockade organized by what has been called the National Women's Strike Movement. Meanwhile, outside the Ministry of National Education, protesters raised a banner that read "Free abortion, free education," and reportedly chanted "Schools free of fascism." Several people were reported to have been detained by police.
Now it's actually 1 month that we are going out for street to protest that we don't agree with the restrictions of the abortion law, which is before the restrictions was already very strict, but now it just makes it even impossible to make a legal abortion in Poland, which makes it even more dangerous. So I want to have a choice and I want to have a permission to decide about my body.
German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas welcomed his French and British counterparts, Jean-Yves Le Drian and Dominic Raab, to Berlin for discussions reportedly on the nuclear agreement with Iran. The three nations, whose ministers met in Berlin, are hoping Tehran can reach an agreement under which the U.S. will lift its crippling sanctions in return for Iran ending its non-compliance with the 2015 agreement constraining its nuclear activities. Biden, the U.S. president-elect, has said he wants the U.S. to rejoin the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, the formal term for the Iran deal signed in 2015, if Iran ends its acknowledged breaches of the agreement, including the excess stockpiling of enriched uranium. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. A former militia leader in the Democratic Republic of Congo was sentenced to life in prison for war crimes and mass rape, a decision held by the United Nations as a blow against the impunity of armed groups in the country. Ntabo Ntaberi, alias Shika, is convicted of murder, rape, sexual slavery, recruitment of children under age 15 by the military court of North Kivu in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo after a trial that lasted 2 years. A warrant was issued for his arrest in January 2011 after a series of attacks in which the NDC and two other groups allegedly raped nearly 400 people in 13 villages between July 30 and August 2, 2010. United Nations agencies reported this Monday that the number of deaths in the autonomous Somali state of Puntland has risen to 9, while 70,000 people were affected by the effects of Tropical Cyclone Gary. Tropical Cyclone Gary made landfall in Somalia on Sunday, with sustained winds of around 105 miles per hour. This was the first recorded instance of hurricane-strength system hitting the country. The strong winds, rains, and associated flooding caused the displacement of some 15,000 people in local villages, in addition to causing damage to infrastructure in the northern region of the country. The authorities, together with humanitarian agencies, are undertaking assessments of the current situation to determine the material needs of the people affected by the disaster. Previously, representatives of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization warned that the storm would affect the movement of cargo and passengers along the sea route that links Somalia with the Gulf state.
Have brought upon us a huge calamity. Several villages were severely affected by the floods, but the hardest hit is our coastal city of Bosaso.
And China launched its most advanced mission to the moon yet this Monday, the first with the aim of bringing moon rocks and bags to Earth in more than 4 decades. The UN Crew Change 5 probe will attempt to collect at least 2 kilograms of lunar dust and debris from the northern region of a previously UN-visited area on the near side of the moon. If successful, the return mission will take China, only the 3rd country after the United States and the Soviet Union, to have retrieved samples from the moon. The last such return mission was carried out in 1976 by the Soviet Union Luna 24 robotic probe, which brought back around 170 grams to Earth. Given that many factors can affect the probe's actual landing point, the China National Space Administration selected a large potential landing area near a volcanic formation, which, if successful, will mean it will collect the youngest volcanic samples to ever be returned from the moon. Armenian citizens began a mass exodus from the Kalbajar district, one of the 7 adjacent to Nagorno-Karabakh. The residents started to return to their homeland after taking out their personal property and industrial materials, as the area was handed over to Azerbaijan. Some ethnic Armenians even burned their homes before leaving. Under the ceasefire agreement, Azerbaijan will regain control of the 3 districts that have been controlled by the separatists since the 1990s.
We were living here for 25 years. We built a house, and now it's very difficult for us to leave this village where my children.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.